right, everybody, welcome to another LinkedIn Labs. And if you have not been here before, what we do is we break down what is happening inside of a sales organization and what is a leader running as experiments so they can get the most out of what their team is doing. So I'm your host. I'm Morgan J. Ingram. I run a company called AMP Social. And what we do is we help sellers be more human through social selling, LinkedIn, and all the fun things. I have Andy here with me here today. He's going to give a little bit of intro. But as everybody's coming in, let us know, where are you tuning in from? Where are you coming from? I know sometimes we have people here from international, so shout out to the people coming internationally. But where you're tuning in from, where you're at, and then I'm gonna have a fun question for everybody too as they come in and they tell us where they're tuning in from, and you let us know that. My fun question for the week for you all is, what is your favorite chocolate? Okay, so Andy, I'm gonna flip that to you, and then we're gonna introduce you. What's your favorite chocolate?
That's a great question. There's a lot of different options, right?
Yeah, look, it's hard question. I know.
I'm not gonna lie. I do like. It's not a specific brand, but anything with hazelnuts in it is one of my favorite. Milk chocolate and hazelnut. I don't know if you guys ever. Obviously, Trader Joe's is not everywhere, but here in California, you go to Trader Joe's, you could buy this hazelnut chocolate. That's just one of the best chocolates I've ever had. So I would say that.
Hazelnut chocolate. I'm gonna go with the Three Musketeers.
There you go.
Growing up, I would just shred through those. They were so
Yeah.
good. So shout out to the Three Musketeers. I'm gonna show love to that one.
Yeah.
And then some people coming in. We got San Antonio in the house, Montana, Singapore. Do they call Nashville Cashville? I feel like if I went to Nashville and called it Cashville, I don't know if they'd let. I don't know if they'd let me in. They'd probably get out of here. So there's that. But let's get into it, y'all. Today we're going to talk about champions, how to leverage them, and making sure that obviously you can book more meetings and close more deals. That's what we're going to talk about today. But Andy, before we do that, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself? What's your day-to-day look like? And we'll get into it.
Sure. My journey in my career has taken me many different places. Started off in selling telecom, then moved on to being an entrepreneur and building a business there. But from there, I went back into the corporate world and started my career as a sales development rep, literally cold calling day to day, like everybody else on this call, and worked my way up to now being the head of global sales development here at Illumio. So a different career trajectory than most, but at the end of the day, I love the sales development role. I think that's where I found my passion.
Amazing. And speaking of passion, that's where we're going to talk about what you're doing today with the team. So we wanted to talk about champions, leveraging them, how to book meetings. I think the first thing that we need to talk about is, what is a champion and how do you define it? So Andy, for you, like, what is a champion? What does that mean for the chat also as well? When you hear champion, what does that mean too? And we can dig into that.
Yeah, I think for me, a champion is two different versions of what a champion is, right? Someone, a stakeholder internally that you've spoken to that can help drive the outcomes that you want to drive and kind of help you through the sales cycle. And oftentimes that comes into a version of a past meeting that you've had with an individual that may have moved to another company that was a big fan of what we were doing. May not have been the person, the EB that purchased the product, but definitely a champion there. And then even someone at a customer account that really was very involved in the process, helped onboard the tool, and then moved to another company that is a prospect and now has influence to try to make change. And that relationship stayed intact when that move happened. So to me, those are true champions to help you move the deal along.
So out of those two, have you found that one is better than the other?
Well, customers usually, because at the end of the day, validation points of what you're selling, the way it was sold, right, does carry over into the next company that they go to. It's all about experience. Just like myself and a lot of sales development leaders that have purchased any type of software, right? You usually go back to the relationships that you have to try to bring that into the next company because you were taken care of, you were well respected, the process, everything was delivered on what they say they would do. So it just makes it a natural decision, right? We always hear people buy from people, and that continues to reign true. And that's truly what a champion is.
So to go a little bit deeper into that, how, for sellers that are in the room, and by the way, everybody, as you come in, if you have questions, feel free to throw it in the chat. This is a conversation, and y'all can chime in. when you're thinking about, obviously you have the champion, you have they have been a customer, etc. How are you distinguishing within those customers that you have the best types of champions to go to, right? Because
Yeah,
something I want to call out is I think some people are like, well, that was a customer, but they could have been an upset customer. So how do we make sure
correct.
it was the right type of champion and customer for us to then speak to?
Yeah, absolutely. So most companies, I would hope, have a different level of kind of gauging where the customer is at and the experience that they've had, right?
Mhm.
So at the end of the day, if you're at an organization and you're trying to tap into the existing customer base to start tracking how they move, the first thing you want to look at is who those customers are and where they are at in their journey, right? Was that a
Yeah,
customer that was, and we have different levels of color, like red, green, and then you have yellow, right? And obviously the green customers are very happy. They're delivering on we're delivering on what they want and what they need. So at the end of the day, when you build out a list, you want to be mindful of either omitting the ones that are in the yellow and or the red category, and
yeah,
omitting those and focusing on the ones that are in the green, because obviously you don't want to, stir up the pot and say you I didn't have a good experience with you
right.
before.
Yeah, and that's the key. I think that's the point is that you're making sure you're not saying, "Oh, okay, well, like let's connect with me so and so," and then there wasn't that
Right.
experience. So based on
Yeah.
that, okay, now we've identified what the champion is. The next step is what to do. But before we do that, let's talk about what not to do, or maybe things that you've seen on your end that you did not like, and maybe you were the champion, and a seller approached you in a way that was like, you wouldn't like to see that happen again. So, what are
Yeah.
things you're seeing when people are trying to leverage champions to then track to, let's say, other deals or other conversations? What are you seeing at the end
Mhm.
of the day as a detractor that's not allowing them to be as successful?
Well, first of all, is assuming that that person is still going to be your champion as well, right?
Yeah,
One of the things that you want to be mindful of is as you're starting your outreach to those individuals, right? Making sure that you have a well-rounded message to that individual, right? Obviously, when they move from company to company, that's one thing, and then saying that, hey, congratulations on your new role and being authentic in your message about that, but then also kind of not assuming that because they are a new champion in a prospect account that they're automatically going to buy,
yep,
right? You approach it with some relationship bullet points that we had an experience, you bought this product, this is what we delivered on, we're hoping to do the same, and we're trying to help see if that's something that's a priority for you in your new organization,
right,
right? But if not, let's at least connect, because things do happen, things do change.
right,
The other part of that is if you want to take it up another level, because a champion is also as good as the team link or the connection of the person that is related to that individual,
yeah,
because that way there's multiple tiers of relationship and degrees of relationship that would make that introductory a lot better. What you don't want to do is assume that they're happy, assume that everything is still the same, assume that they're going to drive change internally, right? You never want to do that, right? Because you're not going to get the same response. And please, when you're sending out an email, especially if you're using AI, don't just hit send, right? Customize
yeah.
that, make it personalized, because at the end of the day, you're still sending a note to someone, even though you have a relationship. You still want it to be impactful and meaningful.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I think that's the is just being impactful, and I think one of the things as well is when you think about
Take a minute to
talking to the
gift yourself with
champion,
some rejuvenating
what are the best ways to
hydration.
communicate with them? Email, LinkedIn, etc. What are you thinking there?
Usually LinkedIn, right? And especially if
Yeah,
you're doing a
more
search and you're
money.
doing a filter, one of the things we talked about earlier, which is if I'm going after that champion, I want to also take a look at what they're posting, what they're saying, because that way I can make it a little bit more relevant. So, and when they're posting on LinkedIn more so than email, we all know what's going on with email today, right?
Yeah,
I'm not going to call out the obvious, but if they're posting on LinkedIn and they're active on LinkedIn, you want to start using LinkedIn as that method to start sending those emails, because there's a higher likelihood of them responding on LinkedIn versus email. But you definitely want to be multi-threaded, right? And you definitely want to reference that, hey, I'm also going to send you an email just in case you don't see this, right?
and so let's go into the tactics here, right? So let's say, hey, I have a good champion. They follow the steps that you said.
Mhm.
What are ways that you're leveraging LinkedIn beyond what you just told me to really connect with that champion to then find other people they can connect with in my target accounts?
Yeah, yeah. So very simple. Step one is just make sure you upload your personas, because I think that was one of the best features that was launched on LinkedIn.
But really,
To
to clarify, the relationship explorer is that what you're talking about?
No, no. At the beginning of when you set up your LinkedIn, there's a little persona button that you can
Okay.
then create all of the personas that are relevant within your ICP,
Okay.
because that takes away some of the guesswork of you having to find those individual titles. You can narrow it down certainly with some Boolean logic and keyword search, try to really narrow it. But start with your personas. Once you have your personas, everybody has a territory, right? Doesn't matter how you split it up. You have a book of accounts, named accounts, whatever it may be. Then you start finding those customers within your patch and you're starting to upload those individuals under the past customer tab, right? Because that way you can search for it. And you could do it as a global or you could do it by individual regions. The filters on the regions or the territories are not that great on LinkedIn. It's not as narrow, like it says APAC or DOC. You may have to say Switzerland or Germany. But when you're doing those filters and then less than a 1 year in a job, that's step one, right? And then you start surfacing all of the relevant titles that are within the personas that you've added. But you can get granular and start adding VP level or C level or go higher. Then you go to take it up to understanding what those people care about. Because as we talked about earlier, doesn't mean that that title is going to be relevant just because that's the title in your persona in your ICP. Make
Right.
sure that you're using some Boolean logic by going to the search bar once you have the results of those individuals and saying, for us, as an example, quote, ransomware or quote, breaches. Because then you start seeing the results for those people that have that within their profiles and or their LinkedIn posts under their activity. So now you know that that person is the right person, the right ICP that not only posts on LinkedIn, but
Right.
cares about ransomware and breaches. So the message is now going to be much more relevant, right? And then you have degrees of how you can then take it up another level where you're using Team Link or connections of to start building the bridges internally to try to connect to those people much faster.
Okay. So Dale dropped this here, which is more information on personas. Dale, what exactly are you looking for here? Just you want him to break that down again more? Do you want to show it on the screen? Let us know what you mean more information. But there, I guess once we understand what more information means, we can drill more
Yeah.
into it, and we can go from there. But in how you're breaking that down, I do have a question for you on personas because I think when people think about buyer personas, especially SDRs or AEs, are like, well, yeah, it's the CFO and the controller, and that's it. So when you
Yeah.
personas, is it just the people who are the buying personas, or you also
Correct.
include people who are non-buying personas as well?
No, you want to focus on buying personas, right?
Okay.
Because the fastest way from point A to B and getting your deals to revenue is you want to focus on the right people. Non-buying personas is the age old of trying to gather information and start using that,
Yeah.
right? The multi-threading approach to get to the right people.
Right.
They're both important. For the purposes of champion tracking, I think it's better to stick within your buying personas.
Okay.
Everybody should have, and if you don't, you can build it up by just looking at the closed won data to build out your buying group, those individuals that are going to drive change and are responsible hands on keyboard to drive that change. And that's who you want to build out. And you can do it by C level, you can do it by, specific EBs, champions, and you get up to 5 choices
Yeah.
with on LinkedIn to choose. And then you build out those each individual ones. But then when you go to your search filters, you can now narrow by, hey, I'm going to focus on C levels today. And those
Yeah.
are the personas that are going to be reflected in your search results.
Okay. Question for everybody in the chat, and then we're gonna bring up a question that for Andy that I just saw in the chat. If you have sales nav, put a one in the chat for us just to see all of the sales nav users that are out there. We obviously would love to see that because obviously we're going into sales nav land here. But this is a really good question that was brought up. So for you, Eddie,
Yeah.
like how can we, right, everybody listening in, proactively support our champions' first 90 days in their new role without sounding opportunistic or transactional? I think this is a really great
100%.
question
Yep.
because I think people get they get a little antsy when they
They do.
change jobs on sales now. They're like, "Oh, you changed jobs? Like, time for some money for me." And it's like, "Nah, man, I gotta chill. You can't be as
Yeah.
crazy." So, what is your advice here on this question? And I think this is a really good
Yeah.
question.
It's a very good question. And thanks for asking, Marcel. I think one of the important things to keep in mind is LinkedIn is a relationship tool, right? So when you're going out and starting a relationship, even if you have a champion that moved that is familiar with your past products, they're not familiar with you, right? And you have to keep that in mind. So when you're sending out an initial email, it's always better to, congratulate them, right? And say how exciting, hopefully, obviously, talk a little bit about, what you're excited about or make it more relevant, but then providing them with some information and content in that first message that's relevant to them, right? Whether it be a little tidbit about what it is that you do, using, when the time comes and you're interested, I just wanted to make sure I put this on your radar, right? Rather than aggressively going, hey, you might be driving change internally and a great experience with us. Let's meet. That's not going to happen. So it takes maybe two touches to really get that person engaged. And then your third touch is really going for the kill and asking for a meeting or asking if they would be interested in learning more, right? But don't go in aggressive by asking for a meeting on the first email you send out, right?
I agree. Yeah, I think that's the is to play it up in a nice way. So hopefully that helps answer that question. And then there's another question on that is when reconnecting with the champion in their new company, how do you balance your relationship with them while also aligning your approach to the new buying personas who may have different pain points or priorities?
Yeah, that's great. And obviously, the different priorities, the different departments is a separate thing, but your champion can help lead you into that too, right? Again, it goes back to the first question that I just answered, which is leading with kind of sending some information, some content that would be relevant and congratulating them, right? And then from there, you start the relationship and the conversation to start building out all the other ones while you're working in the background on all the other ones. It may not be connecting the dots on LinkedIn. It may be starting to reach out to them on a separate cadence or in a separate area, calls, emails, to start building up, the relationship on that side of the fence, but using your champion to know how to navigate that. So email number one, congratulations, excited for you. And here's some information. LinkedIn message number two is to talk to them a little bit about what you do and would anybody find relevance in it. And then number three is you then ask for a meeting and then you build it out from there. While in the background, you're starting to work all the other personas that are relevant for the other products that you're trying to sell. And I think one of the companies, and I'm not plugging this, but one of the companies that does multi-threading the best in that way is Gone, right? You see it often where they go to other champions within their ICP, focus on building and getting information, and then taking that to the ultimate champion to say, here's what I've learned, and here's what we want to talk about, right?
And so, one thing I want to comment on that you mentioned there is making sure that not only you're just because the thing here is that you could just rely on the champion, but you're really kind of going and saying, which I agree with, is that yeah, we can go talk to champion, but we also at the same time just need to be reaching out to the regular buyer personas we should be doing anyways,
Right.
right? So compounds on that. And then the other thing that I want to have a question on is you said relevant content. Where are we going to find relevant content, and what exactly does that mean?
Yeah. So relevant content could be as simple as, again, searching on the activity that they have, if they have any, right? And what they care about, what they post about. And then sharing that information, like going back to my earlier example of ransomware and breaches, right? And talking about here's some content that you may find relevant on a recent article that was posted about breaches, a recent blog post we did on breaches, right? Or a case study that they could find relevant. Keep in mind that, you don't want to send a workbook for them to read. That's not going to happen. But a few bullet points, thought you might find this interesting, given that you just recently posted on ransomware. Here's an interesting case study that you can go ahead and read.
Perfect. And then when you think about case studies and relevancy, is that obviously based on the buyer persona, the industry, and things of that nature? How do we make sure we're
Absolutely.
getting the right?
It's usually based on use cases, right?
Yeah.
Every single organization, every single buyer has a specific use case, right? So if you're in the banking world or if you're in the manufacturing world that you're trying to target, you want to keep that relevance on the content that you're sending.
And I think I'll add to Walter. You put this in the context to kind of summarize what you're saying in the chat. Uh, know your people buy from people. Yes, more even
Absolutely.
deeper. Know your audience. Research is key. Sell a solution that addressing their current challenges. I think the biggest piece of everything is understanding the audience and also understanding the sentiment. Because to your point, when someone changes a job, like immediately reaching out to them and saying, "Hey, let's have a meeting right now," probably isn't the best way of approaching that.
No. You can even tie it to something that's not related to your company, right? There's plenty of studies that Gartner's or McKinsey that they publish that you can find relevant, that could say, "Hey, I don't know if you saw this. It's an interesting read, but just wanted to share it with you." Number one, that might be gated content that they would have to then go out and download. The good thing is you already have it and you're sharing it with them now, so that saves them a step from filling out any forms. But relationships are key, and at the end of the day, using your team link internal relationships as well will help make more of a relevant outreach to that individual.
We'll speak on that. Some people in here may not know what Team Link is, or
Mhm.
probably have never used it before.
Yeah.
It's just dusting away.
Yep.
So, how have you introduced Team Link to your team to make it feel not overwhelming and easy to do?
Absolutely. It's once you do your filters and you have your safe search for champions, then you go in to see the search results. LinkedIn made it super easy for you to see the team link connections. First of all, hopefully your organization has it turned on. And once it's turned on, you start seeing team link connections as a little tab at the bottom of that individual's profile, that search result. You click on that, and it tells you exactly who those individuals are then connected to, and see if there's any type of introductions that can be made leveraging those individuals. You can do the same just at a persona level once you're in that person's profile, or at an account level to start seeing those relevant team link connections, to make those introductions.
And then how many, I guess tactically, when you're looking at Team Link, how many of those are you making to send out? Like, how often should people be updating them or sending them? What's like the cadence for that?
Well, typically every quarter, you want to make sure that you have all the relevant folks that are in your organization, especially the higher C levels, that either you're connected with them or they're part of the Team Link um, feature. You want to make sure they're onboarded, and let's not forget, we forget about board members as well, right? Board members have a lot of influence, and board members could be part of your Team Link connection,
Yeah,
right? It's a little bit of a heavier lift, but I don't know, some of you guys have probably done this. I'm confident in that board members have influence into multiple accounts that you're targeting.
yeah.
So you want to leverage them as well.
Okay, so how do I go about that? What if I'm just starting out, or I've never spoken to the board member? How do I just approach them and say, "Hey, I got this Team
Yeah.
Link, help me out." Like, what's the
Yeah.
best way to approach that?
So the first part is to get it set up. The first part is to make sure that the lines of conversation between you and other board members is open, right? Because sometimes it's a little bit finicky. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. But it starts at a C level, right? So if you're, say, an individual ADR, your manager or your VP should be starting to build out those team link connections, and then from there you should start kind of figuring out who can we leverage for introductions, who is
Yeah,
okay to reach out to, and make sure that it's widely known that these individuals are more than happy to help introduce, right? Because it happens to me all the time where vendors are using their board members or my own board members at my company to leverage the relationships there, right? But that's happening more organically. With Team Link, you have to set it up, and you have to obviously make sure that the lines of approvals are there to do so.
cool. Yeah, I think I've never personally thought of doing the Team Link with the board member, but that would completely change the game if obviously they were open to doing that.
Absolutely. And they are. I mean, I've had it several times where even our own board members got approached, to have conversations, and that drew the line directly to me
Yeah,
for that software. So yeah, you can leverage that. It's a little bit more difficult because they are busy. They do
yeah,
have a lot on their plate, but they want to see the company be successful, especially in early stage Series A, Series B companies. It's all
yeah,
about growth,
yeah.
right? So they're more than happy to do that.
Cool. Hopefully, y'all took that note down, because that's a really critical one. I want to go to Jesse's question here. He said, "Love the statement. Here is some info for radar. When the time is right?" Something you just mentioned. Was this
Mhm.
on the first or second touch point?
This could be on the first or second. Usually, the first, I'm giving information, put it on your radar. Second email is, or email is, did you find any relevance in what I sent you? Obviously, you're not going to say relevance, but what did you think about whatever you're pointing out? And
Yeah,
they may or may not have read it, but that's also the guilty part that comes in. It's
yeah,
like, hey, I didn't get a chance to read it. I
yeah,
apologize. That does sound interesting, right? Let me get a chance to read it. Great. Sounds good. I'll follow up with you next week and see, or follow up with you next week and see what you want,
Right.
whatever you want to say. And that would be your third point. But that also, just to see if they're actually interested, it makes it a little bit better for you to then get a foot in the door because they actually did a little bit of homework and reading what it is that you sent. And by the way, even if they didn't, the reply that they gave you that's saying that, oh, I didn't get a chance to read it yet, says that they're now engaged,
Yeah.
right?
Perfect. Jesse, did that help answer your question? If not, we can dive a lot deeper on that one. Just let us know if that was helpful. And you were talking about building on. So we're talking about reaching out to someone when they change roles. I think that's really good messaging there. What is your take on videos and voice notes on LinkedIn
Yeah.
when reaching out to the champion and being more personal? Are you for it? Are you against it? Everybody has different schools of thought. So I don't know half the time. People are
um,
upset about it. So let's figure out what he's talking about here.
yeah, I've tried it. Voice notes, I think, are a little bit more successful, in my
Mhm.
opinion, because it's kind of like a voicemail, but it's not, right? We haven't really used the actual video portion of it too much.
Okay.
We back in the day tried the Vidyards of the world and the tools that allow us to send video, and it works for certain personas, but it doesn't work for others, right? And so, depending on your title, what we found is that the highly technical folks, they don't look at the video, right? But they do listen to voice notes. So I can't say that it's successful for someone else. It could be,
Sure.
but for us, it hasn't really been.
So voice notes more for the technical persona, not as
Mhm.
much videos.
Correct.
Reaching out, being more personal there. So that's a really good note. And then we have another question that comes in here that is relating to what we're talking about, which is from Eric. So shout out to Eric. Welcome to the show. The question is, what is your approach when your champion exits mid sales cycle? We've all had that happen
Mm,
before. We're all
mm.
hyped, everybody's excited, and then they just straight up Irish goodbye you. And now you gotta close the deal. What do you do then?
Hey, Eric. I actually know Eric, so great question. If they leave mid-cycle, and depending on what they leave to, because if they leave mid-cycle and they haven't gone anywhere, right, there's nothing for you to do. The key is to try to figure out if that relationship was good, and if it was, to try to still leverage that individual via LinkedIn to say, hey, by the way, saw that you left. It's unfortunate. Wishing you the best in whatever next endeavors that you're trying to approach. Who's
Yeah,
the best person that I should be engaging with to continue the conversation, right? And usually there's somebody else that they've handed that project over and that can take over and manage that,
right.
right? So that to me would be the best approach.
Okay. Eric, did that help answer that question there? And then I guess the other thing is too is that like this is the importance of what we mentioned earlier is the multi-thread, right?
Mhm.
Because I've definitely been in situations where I was talking to one person and I thought they were going to be the end all be all, and they were
Yeah.
not, and
Yeah.
I ended up getting myself cooked. So I think that's another thing I'd point out is that like that's another thing that you just want to like focus on
Yeah.
is is identifying, right, at the end of the day that like, hey, like this doesn't have to be the I'm supposed to put it is this doesn't have to be the end all be all, this one person. There's multiple people you should be talking to, having that deal
Yes.
insurance as well.
Yes, absolutely. And multi-threading starts depends on where you want to go. Obviously, usually multi-threading means you ultimately want to get to either a champion or an EB, right? So sometimes what you do is you start collecting information from non-relevant ICB-based title that could be within the same realm of what you're trying to accomplish, and or folks that are lower level that can help gather information for you to help take it to the top. So, when you're thinking about multi-threading in our world, I'm going to go talk to, for example, a security architect to understand their hands-on keyboard experience and the challenges they may be facing. Now, once I gather that information, I'm going to start going up the ladder a little bit more and start using that information to say, hey, I had a recent conversation with so and so. We have a meeting in 2 weeks. Would love to get you engaged. But before we do, wanted to quickly sync with you and see and learn a little bit more about what we just discussed with so and so. Right. And then once you start gathering all that information, then ultimately you can take that all the way up to the C level.
You
Right.
can.
And
Yeah.
this is what I've learned. Here's the challenges. Here's how we can help solve for those. Would love to add you to the conversation in a week and a half, right? Because time
Yeah.
would be passed by. Now, you're not only getting one person, you're getting 3, 4, 5 people to a first call. And I
Right.
can't tell you guys enough. This is pretty obvious stuff. The more people that are within your buying persona that are part of the sales cycle can come in early, the faster the deal will move.
100%. Sometimes the simple and fundamental things don't happen consistently, right?
Correct.
This is what we're talking about as a refresher for people. So hopefully that gives people some new, maybe a new way of thinking about it, even though it is a refresher. And speaking of new ways of thinking about it, I really like what we talked about before we even got on this live about the connections of in sales.
Yeah.
Now, I actually think that that might be the most underrated
Yeah.
sales nav feature, in my opinion. A lot of
Yep.
people don't really use it, and it's like possibly one of the best ones if you built really good relationships. So, could you
Yeah.
walk us through how you and your team use connections of once you've identified a champion, you know it's a good champion, and how you go from there?
Yeah, so connection of going back to what we talked about, board members, C levels, connections of those individuals, right? Team Link will surface information about people that are first, second, third degree connections, right? So that's one part. But connections of is you can go directly to an individual that may not be in that Team Link environment. They may be connections of a board member that you noticed on the web page, right? That you want to find out who they're connected to within that account. It could be a C level at that company that are connected to other people that you may know that aren't necessarily part of that team link.
Yep.
So it's a little bit cumbersome, and the reason why people probably don't often use it because it you go to it and you're like connections of what does that mean, right?
Yeah.
It's not really explained. Every single thing that needs explaining on LinkedIn so far does have a question mark, with the exception of connections of. Like you click on that, it tells you what you need to
That is
do.
a good point. It doesn't have the question. I don't know why it doesn't.
Yeah, so it does take a little bit of lifting because you have to do a search to the people that you think could be relevant in giving you a referral. That's what the connections of is a referral into the target account that you're trying to reach out to that may not be within your team link.
Right. Okay. Hopefully that helped answer some clarity there. And then, uh, how do you think about the connections of, right? Because you,
Yeah,
from what I've seen, you can only put one person in there. You can't put multiple people in there, right? To then build a safe search and make it your life easier. So
right.
how many of these connections of searches would you run? Would you only run them with your the champions and then people on your exec team? Would you be like,
Yeah.
hey, just start with 10 champions and go from there? Like, what's the best way to really set this up?
Yeah, I mean, the first place I would start is the high profile target accounts that you're trying to reach out to, right? Everyone has a top tier account. I don't know how you break it out, your ICP. We have tier one, tier two, tier three,
Yep.
right? You want to focus on your top most relevant accounts using this connection of, because those are the more difficult accounts for you to break into. And you're not just going to break into a C level at a $50 billion company, right? That's not just going to happen overnight.
No.
So what you want to do is you want to identify those key accounts. You want to identify those key individuals within those accounts, and you're trying to look at who are they connected to. How can I get a better foot in the door without going directly to them? Because I know they're probably not going to answer my email or my call.
Right.
And then that's how you focus. There's not a magic number, but the least amount, 5 to 10 accounts, would probably be the best approach.
So when you to clarify that, when you 5 to 10 accounts of connection, like 5 to 10 contacts or 5 to 10 accounts?
5 to 10 contacts within
Okay.
your accounts.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
That's the fair.
Cool. Cool. And then how many, like, this has always been something that I believe in the rule of three. So I typically do 3 or 4 of this, what I'm about to mention. And
Mhm.
for anyone else in the chat, I'm curious on your perspective. When you're looking to ask for the warm intro from this
Yeah.
champion that you've developed,
Yeah.
how many names are you giving them? And I laughed because I was having a conversation with someone and they I was like, what in the world? They said that they
Yeah.
had a friend of a friend and they approached them and said, hey, um, here's all of my list of people I'm trying to get in front of. Can you look through them and provide an intro? And I was like, that's a lot of work. And I
Yeah.
also would not do that. I
Yeah.
think that giving people 3 is good enough because probably one of them is going to be off. But like,
Yeah.
what are you telling your team and how are you looking at it?
Yeah, I agree. It's 2 to 3 at most. You don't want to send a whole list. You got to remember, you got to put yourself in that individual's shoes, right? You got to act or think like them. If you're going to get a whole list of 20, 30 people, they're not going to have the time to go through and sift through to see who they're, that's not what their day to day looks like. But if you make it more relevant, these 2 to 3 individuals, now you have a better chance of them actually looking quickly and skimming that and say, hey, I do have a relationship here, happy to help you and make that introduction. But you have to be authentic about it too, right? You have to be very clear that you may or may not know the relationship of these individuals, but we are connected. We have a relationship. You may know them. Hopefully, you can help me. Or you can spin it to say, hey, been having a tough time trying to break into this account, notice that these 2 to 3 people are connected to you, I would really appreciate it, because you know how difficult it is to try to get in front of someone. If you
Yeah,
can, throw me a bone and help me out and see if any of the 2 3 would be relevant for you to introduce me to. Guys, it's the human connection that matters. Stop being robotic. It's not going to work. And stop being unauthentic. Be authentic. That I just need your help, and asking for help in an authentic way will get you the results you want.
amazing. Other thing I want to drill into here as well is when we're thinking about the connections of reaching out to people, champions, etc. When you are looking at your overall target accounts and the accounts you're trying to get in front of and all the things on this, everyone that's listening in and what they're trying to accomplish,
Yep.
what are you finding the best types? Like, that's the best way to put it is, what are you finding in that, hey, I'm trying to break this account, help me out? What are you finding the best message to give them so they can give a really good intro
To the referral.
to the referral?
Yeah, I
Or you
mean,
just, let's say, hey, let them do their thing because they know them. Is there like a
yeah,
blurb, like framework we can follow? Because I find that that's where people struggle the most. It's like they get
yeah.
someone to say yes, and then they're like, send me a blurb, and they're just like, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, and it goes back to what I mentioned on authenticity, right? You want to start off with, here's some information you can send that's relevant. Make it a little bit personalized to those individuals, right? And if it's 2 to 3 people, you want to obviously have 2 to 3 different, hopefully, introductions that you can send. But you want to make it personalized. And you want to basically lead with the fact that you have this connection that's making an introduction to you, to try to get a conversation going with a little bit of information that they could find relevant, because you have to do your homework. Don't just ask for 2 to 3 people introductions and you don't know anything about those 2 to 3 people, right?
Right.
And make it a little bit more targeted towards them and their role and responsibilities. So that way the outcomes are much better. You get a reply. But don't send a templated ChatGPT email that you think is going to get relevance to that individual.
Yeah, that's a really good call out on that one. So we have about like, 7 10 minutes left. We've talked about a lot of different stuff here. If you have questions, put in the chat. I just put up a sales nav kit that I have built on my end. So if you want to look even more techniques that we're talking about, you can screenshot that QR and check it out. But for Andy, where can people find you? We're going to open up for questions now for everybody. But
Yeah,
where can people find you if they want more information like this?
on LinkedIn, via email. Reach out to me. Happy to help. I myself am a big believer in LinkedIn. I've had LinkedIn come several times to our sales kickoffs and our trainings to walk our team through it. I've built several reports out for our team on champion tracking, on just persona tracking, because it's not just about champions. It's also about people switching jobs, right? New hires coming in. So feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, via email, give me a call. I'm sure I'm on Zoom info somewhere or
Yeah,
on Lucia.
you probably are.
Um,
As we all are.
I'm happy to help. Happy to help.
Okay, so open up for questions, chat if y'all have any. I have a question as you all think about that. So obviously you're deep into LinkedIn, you're deep into sales nav. We're talking about champions. Could you give us a play that maybe you're experimenting with right now that you're excited about? Or if you don't have that, my other question would be, what's the most underrated thing within LinkedIn sales nav and LinkedIn messaging that people aren't doing that they should do more of when it comes to champions?
Um, I would say, first, I don't know if you guys have seen this, but I don't see it happen too often. We're doing it a lot more now. But to be able to build out your persona map, anybody seen the relationship map or the map on an
Yeah,
account
yeah.
level? Yeah. So there's a few things you can do there, right? Is you can start building out your persona map and start identifying the C levels and the folks that could be rolling into them, right? And start building out that map. And within that, you can start even building out anybody that you need to pull in. If you can't find them on LinkedIn, you can go search for them elsewhere. But you can take that map and those individuals that you're trying to target, and then start to organize your outreach strategy based on those individuals, right? And share that, by the way, if you're tied to an account executive to help build pipeline, share that relationship map with them and say, this C level and these are the people underneath that person. These are the people we need to talk to, right? I think that's an underutilized ability to stay focused on your key personas within the accounts you're trying to target versus trying to blanket everyone. Guys, at the end of the day, so we're tied to pipeline and revenue, right? Which I think is a very important thing for SDRs to be tied to, is pipeline and revenue. We want quality. We want to make sure we're talking to the right people early and often so that they can go to closed one. And to do that, you have to understand who you're reaching out to.
Mhm.
That's not just the champions, but you can also start building the relationship maps as a champion, right? Write a note and say, this person came from BYN, New York Mellon, whatever, right? And then you start your outreach process that way.
Okay. I like that. I like that. I like that approach across the board, because I think that will provide some people some new ways of thinking about it
Yeah.
across the board for sure. So another question, as people think about maybe other questions that they have that I want to present to you, is we've talked a lot about champions and what they are and things of that nature. What are the best ways to, you mentioned like be genuine, authentic, but what are the best ways to stay top of mind with champions throughout the year when you don't need anything from them?
That's a great question, actually. But it goes back to content. It goes back to relevance. It goes back to understanding them. Um, Guys, remember, if you're step one, and one of our reps does this really, really well. She has a great, great list of connections on LinkedIn to CISOs and CIOs, people that are relevant to us, because she's actually leveraging that. Her number one, and she's, by the way, 2 times President's Club winner at our organization. Her number one avenue of getting meetings is LinkedIn. She is a pro at it. And what she does is she's connected to all these folks. And part of that is also the ability to track their movement from place to place.
Yeah.
But she's engaging with their content, right? She's liking their content. If I see somebody post, hey, I just started a new job, the first thing I'm doing is saying, hey, congratulations, right? Even if I'm not connected to them, second, third, fourth degree, congratulations, right? And putting a nice like on it, because that starts the process of them starting to see that,
Yeah.
right? And it may not be the right timing. They may not have told you that, and you've tried to reach out and they're not responding. But the more you engage with them, the more they see your brand, the more they understand what it is that you do, because they're going to continue looking at your profile. And when the time is right, trust me, now they know, oh yeah, I remember you wrote a nice post, or you responded to one of my posts, or you can mention that in your email. Then now you're become a little bit more of a known entity versus just some random person sending me a message.
Exactly. Awesome. Well, Andy, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
just breaking down champions, how to identify them, how to go about it. For everyone else, if you had any other, I think we answered most of the questions that came through, so should be good to go there. I would say for everyone, if I were you and I was in your shoes, I think number one is making a list of all the potential people that could do the intros that could be champion that are champions, and doing that connections of reaching out. I actually have my own spreadsheet where it's like people that I've connected with saying, hey, do you know this person? Warm intro. So that's actually been very, very helpful for me to start conversations and accounts and get things moving. So I highly encourage you all to do that. I think number two is understanding what is a champion for you. I think that was a really big one that we
Mhm.
identified and learned today. So those would be the big two that I would do, but I think everyone can take what they took from this conversation and execute. So Andy, we appreciate you taking the time
Yeah,
here on the LinkedIn Labs, giving us things you're
absolutely.
experimenting on and getting success with on LinkedIn. And we'll see you all in the next one.
Appreciate it, Morgan. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.